Twin flames versus soulmates. So we often have more than one soul contract playing out in a lifetime. And today we're going to be looking at the two that I'm asked most often about. So we're looking at twin flame, and if you have a twin flame, you will know this within you. So let's have a look. Spirit for the viewer. Twin flame energy, what do we need to know? We have got the Ace of Swords. And then let's have a look at soulmates. So soulmates can take many different forms. Yes, they can be romantic. They can also be platonic. They can be family members also. So let's have a look. Have a look which energy that you associate with and see which dynamic feels familiar in your current situation. What do we need to know, please? Of course, if you would like your own private reading and soul contract, then there is links to those in my bio. For soulmate, we have got the 10 of Swords. How interesting. So this twin flame energy, we've got the Ace of Swords, and yes, when we place that beside this 10 of Swords for the soulmate, they really do feel like opposite ends of the spectrum. And for a moment, I wondered whether I got the piles the wrong way round, whether this one ought to represent the twin flame. So take it as you will. I'm still going to stick with this one as the twin flame here. So the Ace of Swords, one of its main traditional meanings is that of clarity. It's knowing. It's that sharp, undeniable download of truth. And as I was shuffling, do you remember I said to you, you're going to know whether you have one, if you have a twin flame? And I honestly feel like this card is just confirming that. You will know. There's something inside of you that just clicks. And no, it's not always logical and it's not always comfortable, but it is clear. Now, the sword in this particular card is upright, which to me feels like protection. When a sword is upright, it has this on-duty energy, as it were, very aware, very activated. And I also see this as truth cutting through illusions. So there's something about twin flame connection that really slices through your life, and it does wake you up. Now, in the background of this card, let me bring it a little bit closer. We can see that there are all these wildflowers. There's daisies, there's poppies, there's clover. And with that, it feels like there's something very free, very untamed about that. And twin flame energy often does feel quite wild. And it doesn't always follow the usual script. If you were to try and explain it to another person, then they would not understand at all. So it carries this very raw, open field kind of frequency. And the highlight for me, though, is still this knowing. So people often ask me, how do I know if I have a twin flame? And honestly, you do. There's just something inside of you that knows, even if you don't have the language for it at first. To put that into perspective, for me personally, when I met my igniter twin flame back in the 1990s, I had never heard the term twin flame. And it wasn't until I had a spontaneous Kundalini awakening in 2015 then those words came to me. And the moment they did, I knew exactly who that person was, and suddenly everything made sense. It was like this Ace of Swords cutting through years of confusion. So these days, the term gets used more frequently, maybe sometimes too loosely, but at its core, the card here is talking about awakening, it's talking about downloads, about spiritual activation, something to do with a beginning. The aces are always about beginnings. And a twin flame journey often marks the start of a deeper spiritual journey. Your gifts, they come online, your intuition, it heightens. And you might pick up on patterns from other lifetimes resurfacing. I see that theme time and time again with true twin flame dynamics. So this Ace of Swords for me represents that lightning bolt clarity, the moment where you don't just feel something romantic, you feel the destiny, you feel this activation, and you feel the truth of it. Now, for this soulmate energy, we have this Ten of Swords. And like I said, I find this incredibly interesting. So traditionally, the Ten of Swords talks about the completion of a painful cycle. It's the end of something that might have hurt, something that's maybe run its course. And as I mentioned, for a split second, I actually questioned whether I'd put the piles the wrong way round, because twin flame dynamics are often the ones associated with repeated cycles, you know, that runner chaser and those repeated endings and the intense pain. But sitting with this card a little longer, it doesn't feel like that type of dynamic. So when I look at this, it feels like it might be talking about the different types of soulmates that we have. When I was shuffling, once again, I mentioned romantic, I mentioned platonic and family, your inner circle. And this feels like that. It feels like your close circle, the people who have walked beside you. Now, if you look at the swords here, again, there's one that's pointing upward, and that makes me think of you, this clarity, this protection, this awareness. And then surrounding it are these little swords that are pointing downward. And remember earlier when I said that an upright sword can be protective or on duty, and a downward sword often represents truce, i.e. put your sword down, drop the weapons, lay it to rest. So this could be talking about a completion of cycles within soulmate contracts, but not necessarily in a dramatic or hostile way. It's more like there's agreements that are finishing or seasons that are ending. And I have to ask, how many of you have maybe felt that your inner circle is shifting recently? The only reason I ask is because I have felt it profoundly in my own personal life. That people who once felt closest aren't quite on the same vibrational wavelength anymore. It's almost like there's this sort of sifting and assorting. And that can be really uncomfortable, very saddening actually. Especially if there's more than one relationship that is shifting at the same time. So traditionally, the Ten of Swords is about completion. So it might be that several soulmate contracts are now naturally winding down. And it's not because anyone's done anything wrong, but because the lesson or the growth or that season has finished. Now there's something else in this card that I have never noticed before today. Even though I've worked with this deck hundreds of times, it's one of my most favorite decks. I'll bring it closer to you, but can you see that on the sword there is this handle mechanism that seems to run through different holes here? Almost looks like an old crank handle that you'd use to start a car, winding something up to bring it to life. And you know, interestingly, if you look at it, it does seem to form this kind of snake-like form. And we've just left the year of the snake. And we know that snakes are about shedding skin, transformation. So again, I can't help but wonder if something has been cranked, something internally activated, like you've turned the mechanism. And now these dynamics, they can't continue in the same way that they once did. So while this card traditionally looks really painful, and yes, I do believe there could be some grief in recognizing that some soulmate contracts are changing, it feels cyclical. It doesn't feel chaotic, it feels complete, maybe necessary. So some connections are very much here to awaken you, and some are here to walk with you for a time. And some are really here to teach you and then lovingly release you into the next chapter. Of course, this is a collective reading and it certainly isn't going to resonate with everyone. If you would like your own private reading, whether that be a same-day reading or a soul contract reading where we can look into twin flame dynamics for you or soulmate, then you will find this link within my bio and it will take you to all of my offerings that you will find linked right here.